pregnant wife pretends to be broke millionaire husband, and his mistress fail the loyalty test. They say marriage is built on trust. But what happens when that trust is nothing but a mirage? Welcome to a story so twisted and dramatic it seems ripped from a high-stakes soap opera. Meet Elena, pregnant, kind-hearted, and the seemingly simple wife of a charming millionaire. Little does her husband, Nicholas, know that she comes from old money herself. In fact, she's about to unleash the most shocking loyalty test he's ever faced. His new mistress thinks she's won his heart, but sometimes betrayal and greed collide in a storm of epic proportions. Get ready for a roller coaster ride where secrets explode and karma comes calling hard. Elena stared out the window of the luxurious penthouse she shared with her husband, Nicholas Kingsley. Perched on the 45th floor of a sleek skyscraper in New York City, their home boasted a jaw-dropping view of the iconic skyline. To any onlooker, life couldn't be more idyllic. Nicholas, a self-made millionaire or so, the rumor went, seemed to have it all: a booming construction business, connections with top real estate moguls, an array of fancy cars, and a social circle that included celebrities and influential politicians. Their weekend getaways often involved private flights to exotic destinations, 5-star resorts, and extravagant parties. But behind the public facade, Elena felt a growing disquiet. She held a secret Nicholas had never cared to unravel, that she came from a prominent old money family in France. The Lavines were well-known industrialists in Paris, with ties to technology, pharmaceuticals, and even the arts. Elena had insisted on forging her own path, away from the watchful eye of her powerful parents, hoping to find a love that valued her for who she was, rather than how much wealth she might inherit. She had met Nicholas at a charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton in Paris, where she'd simply attended as a sponsor, not revealing her family name on the invitation. Nicholas had been instantly captivated by her unassuming charm and intelligence. Elena, for her part, was impressed by his seeming drive, his promises of building a genuine empire, and especially his affection for her quiet, introspective nature. She believed she had found a man who would see her, not her bank account. Once they got married, Elena allowed Nicholas to take the lead in everything. She chose not to flaunt her finances, letting him believe his fortune was the pillar upholding their luxurious life. It wasn't that she wanted to deceive him, she wanted genuine love and companionship. Besides, it never occurred to her that he might exploit her if he knew the truth. However, as the months turned into years, subtle changes in Nicholas's behavior hinted at something deeper. There was an air of restlessness around him, a longing for attention, and the compulsion to exhibit his wealth at every opportunity. He began making offhand remarks about how lucky Elena was to have found him a man who could provide her the life she never would have had otherwise. At first, Elena ignored these jibes, but they became more frequent, more condescending, and eventually escalated into blatant disrespect. He'd criticize her for buying modest clothes or reusing grocery store coupons. He would belittle her taste if she dared suggest a simpler honeymoon destination or a weekend retreat that wasn't extravagant. Elena found herself walking on eggshells, worried that one misstep might incite his disdain. Still, her love for him endured until the day she discovered she was pregnant. Nicholas's initial reaction to her pregnancy was lukewarm. He offered a perfunctory kiss on her forehead, then promptly inquired whether their impending responsibility might jeopardize his desire to travel extensively. Elena brushed it off. She assumed he was simply shocked and needed time to adjust to the idea of becoming a father. Yet, as the weeks passed, she noticed something else, an increasing number of nights when Nicholas wouldn't return home. Work, he said, but Elena knew better. Construction deals didn't usually require late-night meetings at upscale lounges downtown. Some nights, she pretended to be asleep when he'd finally walk in, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers. She questioned him cautiously, but he always turned the blame on her, accusing her of being paranoid or overly emotional due to her pregnancy. But the final straw came when he carelessly left his phone on the kitchen counter. Elena watched it buzz with messages from a contact named May. Though suspicious, she fought the urge to snoop. She wanted to trust her husband. In an impulsive moment, curiosity won. She glanced through the messages. "I miss you," wrote May. "Can't wait to see you again." Last night was incredible. Heart pounding, Elena scrolled up and discovered a trove of flirtatious, lust-filled exchanges. There was no denying it. Nicholas was having an affair. Torn and devastated, Elena felt her entire world shatter. She wasn't the type to explode into rage. Rather, she retreated inward, tears brimming in her eyes as she tried to figure out what to do next. Should she confront him? Leave him? But she was pregnant. She wanted a family. She wanted to believe, still, that there might be some rational explanation, though she knew deep down the truth. Nicholas was a cheater. Worse, he still claimed to love her while running around with another woman. That same evening, Elena returned the phone to its place, took a few deep breaths, and confronted Nicholas calmly. "Is there something you want to tell me?" she asked. She noticed the flicker of guilt in his eyes, but he covered it with practiced confidence. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. She carefully explained that she had seen the messages. Nicholas's expression hardened. His entire posture turned defensive. "I told you it's business." He shot back, but that made no sense. May was obviously not a business associate. The phone messages were painfully clear. That night, Nicholas packed a small bag, claiming he needed to cool off. He left Elena standing at the doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks. She clutched her abdomen, frightened for her unborn child. She could only wonder what future lay ahead. In bed that night, a thought came to her. If Nicholas had truly fallen out of love, she would have to accept that. But the manner in which he treated her, disrespect, lying and ignoring his responsibilities, was beyond cruel. She began to question his motives. Had he always wanted a trophy wife and a backup plan? Did he value her for her unwavering support, or just for the image she added to his grand life? Beneath her heartbreak, anger began to bloom. She resolved to find out the truth. A few days later, Nicholas returned, feigning apology. He kissed Elena's cheek gently, apologized for his outburst, and claimed it was all a misunderstanding. He wore a mask of remorse, but his eyes betrayed him. Elena knew he was just trying to placate her. May was still in the picture. Elena was certain. She had seen more messages on his phone when he left it carelessly charging in the living room. Despite her seething anger, Elena decided to play along. She needed a plan, and confrontation without evidence or a decisive strategy would only give Nicholas the upper hand. Several ideas raced through her mind. Perhaps she could hire a private investigator to gather proof. Or maybe she could simply walk away, returning to her family's estate in France. But one notion glowed bright and clear. She would test Nicholas's loyalty, and if he failed that test, he would lose everything. The plan was bold and a bit risky, but Elena had resources Nicholas couldn't fathom. She began to craft a scenario where she would appear financially ruined, left only with her unborn child and the clothes on her back. Then she would see what Nicholas was truly made of. If he truly loved her, surely he'd remain by her side, no matter the misfortune. But if he was the opportunist she was beginning to believe he was, he'd jump ship. To execute this scheme, Elena enlisted the help of one of her most trusted friends, Gabriel Dupont, an old family ally living in New York. Gabriel worked closely with the Lavigne family's legal and financial matters in the US. Because she had never revealed her true identity publicly, it was easy for her to remain anonymous. Gabriel was aware of her marriage to Nicholas, but had never met him in a formal setting. Confident he would keep her secret, Elena explained her plan. She disclaimed to Nicholas that her entire fortune, and thus any security she might have offered, was gone. She intended to create a scenario that would make Nicholas believe he might need to financially support her. They'd watch how he reacted. If he stood by her, maybe there was hope. If not, she'd have all the proof she needed to end the marriage. It took a couple of weeks to set up. Using her family connections, Elena arranged for a staged scandal in one of her father's US-based businesses, something that would appear to drain her invisible assets. She told Nicholas vaguely that her father's small-time trust was at risk and that she might lose a modest inheritance. Nicholas, who was under the impression Elena's father was a run-of-the-mill retiree in France, didn't pay much attention. That changed one day when Elena sat him down to break the news that the inheritance was gone. She explained that the scandal had forced her father to recall every fund, leaving Elena with virtually nothing in the US. While the story was a partial fabrication, it was enough to raise alarm for Nicholas, who, up to that point, had considered Elena's finances negligible. Now that it might affect him, he was suddenly interested. He laughed, almost relieved. "Is that all? I'm the one with the money. Don't worry, baby, I've got us." But Elena could see a subtle flicker in his eyes. Was it annoyance? Fear that he might actually have to step up and be her only financial support? To make the ruse believable, Elena started making drastic changes. She paused her credit cards, telling Nicholas she felt uncomfortable spending lavishly now that she had lost her small nest egg. She began seeking cheaper grocery options, cancelled weekend getaways, and insisted they cut back on extravagant dinners. She even took it a step further. She told Nicholas she wanted to stay at a simpler place to reduce expenses. Furious, he almost spat out his morning coffee. "But what about our penthouse?" he demanded. "You can't seriously expect me to leave this place." She calmly insisted that she didn't want to be a burden on him, that she felt guilty about not contributing financially anymore. Nicholas resisted. The penthouse was part of his image, part of the persona he'd painstakingly built up in his social circles. He had no intention of giving it up, even if it cost him a fortune. So he made an excuse. He told Elena that he'd figure out the finances and that they'd keep living the way we always have. Privately, Elena knew that the money for this extravagant lifestyle mostly came from her well-invested inheritance and her father's occasional discreet support. Despite Nicholas's alleged success, his construction business wasn't as profitable as he boasted. In fact, it was heavily reliant on partnerships and borrowed capital. But Elena kept that to herself. She wanted to see whether Nicholas would step up to the challenge or begin looking for an exit. Sure enough, suspicious phone calls and late-night outings grew more frequent. Once, Elena overheard him muttering to someone on the phone. "She's broke now," he grumbled. "I mean, she can't even buy a new dress without guilt-tripping me." He paused, listened, then responded, "Don't worry, I've got my own savings stashed away. Worst case, I'll file for divorce once the baby is born." Elena clutched her sweater in agony as she eavesdropped from the hallway. Her unborn child kicked gently as though sensing her distress. On another occasion, Elena found a stack of travel brochures for romantic hideaways in the Maldives, complete with scribbled hearts around certain honeymoon packages. They weren't from her. She was painfully aware they belonged to May. The mistress was planning a post-divorce honeymoon, it seemed. The betrayal was a dagger to her heart, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had to see this through to the end. May was a young socialite, heavily active on Instagram, flaunting her designer clothes and her nights out at exclusive clubs. She posted pictures of lavish dinners at places like 11 Madison Park and Carbone, with captions such as, "Living my best life." Elena, who kept her own online presence minimal, started silently following May's account. The woman was evidently enthralled with Nicholas, posting not-so-subtle hints, shots of a man's hand with a certain watch, visible one that Elena had gifted Nicholas for their first anniversary. Group photos with other well-to-do friends, with May tagging the location at fancy rooftop bars. Everything about May's page exuded a thirst for the high life. And ironically, it was a life that she believed Nicholas alone could provide. Nicholas, equally enthralled by the flattery and attention, indulged her. He was spending money he didn't really have, maintaining illusions for May, all while Elena pretended to be financially dependent on him. The hypocrisy was staggering. Driven by heartbreak and a newfound resolve, Elena made it a point to cross paths with May. She attended a charity cocktail event at the Plaza Hotel, an event May had posted about on Instagram. Elena wore a simple yet elegant black dress, understated jewelry, and minimal makeup. She wanted to appear modest. She found May in conversation with a cluster of admirers, laughing lavishly while sipping champagne. Gathering her courage, Elena approached with a polite smile. She introduced herself casually. "Hello, I'm Elena. Mind if I join the conversation?" May, not recognizing her as Nicholas's wife, since Elena kept a low profile, welcomed her. For a moment, Elena felt a wave of anger building, but she steadied herself. She needed to keep her composure. She discreetly observed how May interacted, how she always steered topics toward opulence, talking about wealthy men, lavish vacations, and expensive gifts. This woman was certainly a gold digger, plain and simple. During a lull in the conversation, Elena asked May, "What's your favorite spot in the city for a date night?" She wanted to gauge May's taste. "Oh, definitely La Grenouille or Per Se," May replied coyly. "The men I date know I only settle for the best." Elena forced a smile, feigning ignorance. "Wow, that must be nice," she said, her voice trembling slightly from a mix of nerves and revulsion. May chuckled. "It is, though it's all about finding the right man. I've got a special someone, you know. He's going through a rough patch with his wife right now, but soon we'll be free to travel wherever we want." Elena's heart pounded. So Nicholas had fed May a sob story, painting Elena as an unloving spouse. The nerve! She could have confronted May right there, but she bit her tongue. A public scene wouldn't solve anything, nor would it serve her plan. So she simply excused herself, heading to the ladies' room. There, she locked herself in a stall, her hands shaking as she realized just how deeply Nicholas had fallen into deception. Her mind buzzed with anger and heartbreak. But that heartbreak soon transformed into grim determination. May was yet another pawn in Nicholas's game, or perhaps Nicholas was a pawn in May's. Either way, Elena was done being the naive wife. The time had come for the loyalty test to unfold in full force. Elena's next moves were meticulous. She arranged with Gabriel to have a mock meeting at a high-profile bank in downtown Manhattan. Nicholas was invited under the pretense that Elena needed one final chance to salvage her father's collapsing trust. She hinted at the possibility that there could still be some funds left if negotiations with the bank went well. Nicholas jumped at the chance, obviously enthralled by the idea of money flowing back into Elena's account. The meeting was staged in a posh conference room with sweeping views of the city. Gabriel played the role of a stern bank representative, forging documents that would suggest Elena had an account worth millions, provided certain conditions were met. Nicholas, wide-eyed, observed from across the gleaming mahogany table. Elena deliberately acted anxious and meek, emphasizing that everything hinged on the bank's decision. In front of Nicholas, Gabriel stressed, "We can't guarantee this inheritance. There are complicated legal proceedings that might cost more money up front, and the final payout could take years." Nicholas, trying to sound supportive, quickly asked, "How much money are we talking about?" Gabriel slid a figure on paper. It read $40 million, Nicholas's breath caught. A subtle gleam lit up his eyes, like a child eyeing a Christmas present. Elena watched him carefully. He was no longer ignoring her financial crisis. If anything, he was more invested now that the potential payoff was massive. Gabriel also explained that if these proceedings were successful, Elena would essentially have access to a trust her father had established. But due to the legal quagmire, if no resolution came soon, the entire fortune might be lost in a labyrinth of court battles. Nicholas's face tightened with concern. Clearly, he wanted that money secured. At the end of the meeting, he even insisted on paying for a high-end lawyer out of his own pocket to help Elena. "I'll do anything to help," he proclaimed, sounding the part of the devoted husband. After they left the bank, Nicholas was surprisingly attentive. He took Elena to a cozy restaurant, asked about her stress levels, rubbed her feet at home, and even tried to talk about baby names. For a moment, Elena felt a sting in her chest. She knew this sudden outpouring of affection wasn't genuine love. It was the lure of a potential windfall. Yet part of her hoped she was wrong, that maybe Nicholas was rediscovering the love they once shared. She shook off the sentiment. She had read the messages on his phone. She knew about May. She reminded herself that he had effectively planned a future without her once the child was born. No, this was strictly about greed. As part of Elena's plan, she began discussing Plan B scenarios. What if the trust never materialized? What if she truly ended up with nothing? Would Nicholas still be with her? This time she was direct. One evening after dinner, she approached him gently. "Nicholas," she began, "we need to talk about the worst-case scenario. If my father's trust never comes through and I remain broke, can I count on you? Will we still be a family?" Nicholas hesitated, avoiding her gaze. "Of course," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. He busied himself with his phone. Elena pressed further, "Because if not, I'd rather know now than later." He looked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Stop talking like that," he said, placing his hand on her shoulder. "I love you, and this baby is mine too. We're in this together." But Elena had seen the storm behind his eyes. He was losing patience with her lack of wealth. The next day, Nicholas made a phone call to May again, leaving his phone in the next room. Elena overheard the conversation. "She says the money might never come through. Can you believe it? I've wasted years on her. But hold tight, May. If we can just string her along until the baby is born, we can lock in child support or some of her father's estate. If not, we'll get a divorce. Either way, we'll figure out a settlement." Elena's hands balled into fists. She was seething, so Nicholas planned to use the baby as leverage. The revelation added another layer of heartbreak. But at least now she was certain his loyalty was a farce. That evening, Elena decided to accelerate her plan. She told Nicholas she had an important final negotiation at the bank the following week, one that would determine once and for all whether she kept her father's inheritance. If the ruling was unfavorable, she would be left penniless, with zero contributions to the marriage. Nicholas feigned support, though inside, Elena knew he hoped for a large payout so he could access more wealth. On the day of the final negotiation, Nicholas was scheduled to accompany Elena to the bank at 11 a.m. Unbeknownst to him, Elena had orchestrated a different scenario. She arranged for the doorman at their building to intercept Nicholas with a fake emergency phone call when he came down to the lobby. She then rushed to the bank alone, telling Gabriel that the final move was in play. Gabriel handed Elena a real set of documents papers that disclosed her actual family fortune, far exceeding even the $40 million figure. It was a staggering amount, evidence of how truly wealthy the Lavines were. Gabriel had also prepared an alternative set of documents that declared Elena was completely broke. The real documents would remain hidden until the loyalty test was complete. At 11:30 am, Nicholas arrived breathless at the bank's conference room, apologizing for being late. Elena sat there, looking distressed as Gabriel delivered the verdict. With a solemn expression, Gabriel placed the alternate documents on the table, declaring, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Kingsley. The trust is beyond salvage. You've lost everything." He slid the paperwork toward Elena. "We did all we could, but there's no inheritance coming your way." Elena feigned shock and despair, holding her head in her hands. Nicholas's reaction was immediate, his face drained of color, his jaw tightened. Yet, he managed to posture a consoling arm around Elena's shoulders and say, "We'll get through this," in a weak attempt at support. Gabriel offered a hollow "I'm sorry" before stepping out of the room, leaving them alone. As soon as the door closed, Nicholas dropped his arm. His entire demeanor changed, as though a switch had flipped. "Are you sure there's no chance of appealing?" he snapped at Elena. She shook her head, letting tears roll down her cheeks, tears fueled by heartbreak rather than the contrived scenario. "They said it's final," she whispered. Nicholas paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "So you're telling me we're stuck with all these expenses, just me, paying for everything now?" He glowered at her stomach, as though the baby was a burden rather than a blessing. "I mean, I love you, but this is a lot." Elena stared at him, her heart pounding, waiting to see if he'd utter some comforting words. Instead, he muttered, "I'll need time to think about this." Elena nodded numbly, fighting the urge to unleash all her anger right then and there. She forced herself to remember the plan's final phase, letting him hang himself with his own rope. In the aftermath of the bank meeting, Nicholas turned cold. He spent more nights away, some with the feeble excuse of business, others without bothering to lie. Elena discovered receipts for fancy dinners for two, clubs, and weekend getaways to the Hamptons. None of them included her. She heard from mutual acquaintances that Nicholas was seen in the company of a younger, glamorous woman, clearly May. The affair was out in the open, but Nicholas didn't care enough to hide it anymore. One afternoon, Elena returned from a prenatal checkup to find May in the penthouse living room. She was perched on the leather sofa, sipping a martini as if she owned the place. Nicholas was nowhere to be seen. Shocked, Elena demanded, "What are you doing here?" May gave her a mocking smirk. "I was waiting for Nicholas. He told me I could make myself at home." The nonchalance with which May displayed her presence infuriated Elena, but she kept her composure. She refused to show any weakness, especially not in front of her husband's mistress. Moments later, Nicholas walked in from the bedroom. He barely blinked at Elena's dismay. "We need to talk," he said, turning to May. "Could you give us a minute?" May scoffed but strutted out onto the balcony, phone in hand. Nicholas crossed his arms, meeting Elena's gaze with a hardened glare. "I'm filing for divorce," he said bluntly, each word like a dagger. "I can't keep up this facade anymore. I'll make sure you're taken care of for the baby, but that's it. We're over." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. Even though she had expected this, hearing him say it out loud was gut-wrenching. She stared at him, hoping to see a shred of doubt or remorse. Instead, his gaze was cold, almost bored. "We can discuss the details with the lawyers," he added. "I'm sure we can reach an agreement, but I can't be married to someone who brings nothing to the table." He turned away, as if she were already a memory. From the balcony, May glanced over her shoulder, smirking triumphantly. In that moment, Elena's sorrow transformed into a powerful resolve. The time had come. She had tested Nicholas's loyalty, and he had failed in the most heartless way possible. The illusions shattered, Elena no longer felt the need to cower or hide her true identity. She clutched her wedding ring, feeling the cold metal bite into her palm, and whispered, "Yes, let's discuss this with the lawyers." She then swept past him, heading to the master bedroom to retrieve a bag of items she had prepared for this very confrontation. Elena enlisted Gabriel's help once again. This time, The plan was to invite Nicholas and May to what would appear to be a final financial mediation at Gabriel's office. The idea was to present the divorce agreement, settle property disputes, and finalize matters regarding child support. Nicholas, eager to end the marriage and start his new life, greedily anticipated the meeting, likely hoping to secure some settlement from Elena. Though he believed she was penniless, he still suspected there might be something to gain. May joined him, her eyes brimming with smug confidence. She was now wearing the expensive watch Elena had recognized from Instagram, a watch that likely cost more than a modest car. Nicholas's car was parked outside, a brand new Jaguar that Elena was pretty sure he couldn't afford outright, not with all the debts piling up from his lavish spending. The conference room at Gabriel's office was tastefully decorated with tasteful modern art. A large window overlooked Central Park's lush greenery, while sleek leather chairs encircled a polished wooden table. Gabriel, in a formal suit, greeted them all with professional politeness. Elena arrived last, carrying a slim black folder. Nicholas glanced at her barely there baby bump under her elegant yet simple dress, but made no effort to help her with a chair. May just rolled her eyes. Gabriel cleared his throat. "Let's proceed," he said, sliding some paperwork across the table. "Mr. Kingsley, Miss May, and Mistress Kingsley, we're here to finalize the terms." He explained that Elena had agreed to forfeit any claim on Nicholas's properties if Nicholas in turn offered a fair child support arrangement. Nicholas snorted. "She doesn't get any of my property. I'm the one who made this money." Elena remained silent, mentally cataloguing every lie he'd ever told. She waited for the perfect moment to strike. Once the pleasantries concluded, Gabriel nodded to Elena. "There's an additional matter Mistress Kingsley needs to address," he said formally. Elena stood, her heart pounding with a strange mix of nerves and righteous fury. She placed the black folder on the table and opened it, revealing a small stack of crisp documents, stamped and notarized. "This," Elena began quietly, "is a revelation I've withheld out of love, but I see now how misplaced my trust was." She turned toward Nicholas, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. "You see, Nicholas, my father is not a small-time retiree in France. He is Raymond Lavigne, the owner of Lavigne Industries." She paused, letting the weight of the name sink in. May raised an eyebrow, perplexed. Nicholas swallowed hard, suddenly wary. Lavigne Industries was a well-known entity, especially among corporate circles, a multinational giant with vast holdings in tech, pharmaceuticals, even some stake in real estate ventures across Europe. "These documents," Elena continued, "prove that I have my own trust fund, worth far more than $40 million. The money was never lost. I pretended to be broke because I wanted to see if you would remain loyal when you thought I had nothing." She took a shuddering breath. "You failed that test miserably." Nicholas opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His skin turned ashen. May let out a nervous laugh. "Is this a joke?" she said, eyeing the papers. Gabriel shook his head, maintaining his solemn expression. "It's quite real. Mistress Kingsley is, in fact, one of the principal heirs to the Lavigne fortune. The entire fiasco over the trust being lost was a fabrication one she orchestrated with my help, all to gauge your loyalty." May's eyes darted to Nicholas, seeking reassurance. He stared at Elena, a mix of shock, anger, and desperation crossing his features. "Elena, why?" he managed to stammer. Elena laughed bitterly, tears threatening to spill. "Why?" she echoed. "Because I loved you. I gave you my heart, and I wanted to know if you loved me back. All you had to do was be a decent husband. But instead, you cheated with her." She flicked a disgusted glance at May. "You made plans to leave me as soon as I gave birth, and you only stuck around because you thought you might get something out of my father's estate. If you had any shred of genuine love or loyalty, you would have stood by me regardless. Nicholas's composure shattered. He slammed his fist on the table. "You tricked me!" He roared, as if that absolved him of blame. "I was under a lot of pressure. You never told me you had that much money." "I wouldn't have. He glared at May, who was inching away from him, trying to avoid the mess. She was realizing that any chance at the lavish life she envisioned with Nicholas had just evaporated. "May," Nicholas pleaded, noticing her retreat. She held up her hand, stepping back. "Don't drag me into this," she snapped. "You said she was broke. This changes everything." Her eyes flitted to Elena's folder, possibly considering whether she could glean some advantage. Elena shrugged off May's obvious greed and continued, her voice trembling but resolute. "As it stands, I'm filing for divorce. However, you will get nothing. I have pre-existing prenuptial agreements that protect my assets. In fact, my father insisted on them when we got married. You can't touch a single cent of my inheritance." She slid a document toward him, one detailing the prenup. Nicholas scanned it, and every hint of color drained from his face. Elena could see the realization dawn on him. He was going to lose the penthouse, the glamorous lifestyle, everything. He could keep his struggling construction company, but that was a far cry from the fortune he had so arrogantly boasted about. Karma had arrived, swift and brutal. Nicholas stormed out of Gabriel's office, leaving May behind. The mistress hesitated, looking torn between chasing after him or lingering to see if there was some angle to exploit. Finally, she turned to Elena with a forced smile. "Look, I didn't know all this. I'm sorry if things got messy." Elena's eyes flashed. She felt a jolt of pity for May. Was she truly just a pawn, or was she a willing participant? Either way, Elena had no sympathy left. "You should go," she said curtly, motioning toward the door. May stammered something unintelligible and rushed off. Gabriel placed a reassuring hand on Elena's shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said gently. She nodded, though her heart felt heavy. This was not a triumph. It was a tragedy that she had once loved Nicholas wholeheartedly. She had envisioned him as the father of her child, a partner for life. Now, she was left with the crumbling remains of deception. Over the following days, Nicholas bombarded Elena with calls, texts, and tearful voicemails. He oscillated between fury and desperation. In one breath, he accused her of being deceitful. In the next, he begged her to give him another chance. Elena ignored them all, determined to stand her ground. She had one priority now, her unborn child. Stress was the last thing she needed, but Nicholas's meltdown wasn't done. He started calling mutual acquaintances, lamenting that Elena had tricked him. "She played me," he cried to anyone who would listen. But many, even those who once admired Nicholas, saw through his words. After all, he was the one publicly parading around with a mistress. He had no moral high ground to stand on. His once envied reputation crumbled. Business partners began withdrawing from deals, fearing his volatile behavior and tarnished image. Rumors swirled that his construction company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Meanwhile, May disappeared from his life. She posted a final Instagram story from a first-class lounge at JFK Airport, captioned, "New Beginnings." She never mentioned Nicholas again. The gold digger had found another route to the high life. Elena moved into a tranquil apartment near Central Park, arranged discreetly by Gabriel. She wanted peace and anonymity for her pregnancy. The space was smaller than the penthouse, but it was tastefully furnished. More importantly, it felt like hers. She could design it to reflect her own style, not the showy extravagance Nicholas demanded. She began focusing on self-care, prenatal classes, and therapy sessions to process the emotional turmoil. Bit by bit, she reclaimed her sense of self. Her parents, who had stayed out of her marriage for the most part, arrived from France to offer support. Raymond Lavigne, a dignified man with salt and pepper hair, took Elena's hands in his and apologized for not stepping in sooner. "But you asked us for space, for trust," he sighed. I only wanted to respect your wishes. I never imagined Nicholas would turn out like this. Elena hugged him, tears flowing freely, feeling the warmth of her parents' unwavering love. Legal proceedings for the divorce chugged along. Nicholas's attempts to contest the prenup failed spectacularly. The documents were ironclad, stating that if Elena ever filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity, he forfeited any claim to marital property or spousal support. As for child support, the courts mandated that Nicholas pay a reasonable amount based on his actual income, a sum far smaller than he might have once afforded. He protested loudly, claiming Elena had tricked him, but the judge was unmoved. Infidelity is infidelity, the judge said curtly, finalizing the order. Nicholas left the courthouse visibly deflated, his once confident strut replaced by slumped shoulders. Paparazzi snapped photos as he climbed into a now less luxurious sedan. The Jaguar had been repossessed. Once the divorce decree was issued, Elena felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. Yet, she still battled waves of sadness over the lost dreams of a happy family with Nicholas. Therapy helped her come to terms with the betrayal. She recognized that the man she fell in love with no longer existed, if he ever truly had. The illusions had dissolved. She found solace in knowing her child would be free of a toxic environment. Months passed, and Elena's belly grew. She took daily walks in Central Park, reveling in the quiet joys of feeling her baby kick. One crisp autumn morning, she unexpectedly crossed paths with Nicholas. He looked disheveled, face drawn with worry lines. He was alone, leaning against a park bench, as though waiting for something or someone who might never come. "Elena," he called hesitantly when he spotted her. She halted, her pulse quickening. Memories of heartbreak flashed through her mind, but she steeled herself. She was different now, stronger, more self-assured. She could handle this. "How are you?" Nicholas asked, eyes flicking to her pregnant belly. She offered him a cool glance. "I'm fine. I'm doing well." He let out a small, mirthless laugh. You look beautiful." She said nothing. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Elena folded her arms across her chest, not sure what response he expected. "You destroyed my trust," she said quietly, "and you almost turned my life upside down." "I don't know what you want me to say." Nicholas lowered his gaze, nodding. "I know I messed up. I was greedy. But I did love you, in my own way." Elena's lips curved into a sad smile. "Your own way included sleeping with another woman and planning to divorce me. That's not love." He flinched. "I'm losing the penthouse next month. Couldn't make the payments. The business is barely afloat. Investors pulled out. Everything's falling apart." She detected a note of self-pity, and for a fleeting moment she wondered if she should feel sorry for him. But then she remembered how he had spat venom at her when he believed she was broke. She straightened her spine, standing taller. "I'm sorry things turned out this way," she said with measured calm. "But you made your choices. Now you face the consequences." Her unborn child kicked gently, as though affirming her words. Nicholas looked at her with a desperation she had never seen before. Is there any chance we could?" "No," she interrupted, voice firm. "I deserve better, and so does our child." She turned and began to walk away, leaving Nicholas behind. He watched her go, sorrow etched on his face. In that moment, Elena realized karma had indeed come full circle. He was alone with a crumbling empire, while she carried a new life forward with every intention of giving that life a stable, loving environment. Shortly before Elena's due date, she relocated to a serene property upstate, a charming estate that her father had purchased decades ago. She found solace in the rolling hills, lush gardens, and a calm environment where she could await the arrival of her baby girl. She set up a nursery adorned with soft pastels, delicate lace curtains, and a well-stocked library of children's books, determined to instill a love for stories and imagination from a young age. During quiet evenings, Elena reflected on the whirlwind journey that had brought her here, falling in love, getting married, discovering betrayal, orchestrating the ultimate loyalty test, and, finally, freeing herself from a toxic marriage. She recognized that her story, though heartbreaking, was also one of empowerment. She had managed to expose the truth behind Nicholas's facade without compromising her integrity. In time, news reached her that Nicholas's construction company had gone bankrupt. Gossip from old acquaintances suggested he had tried to partner with a shady investor and ended up losing it all. He had been forced to move out of his penthouse, renting a modest apartment somewhere on the outskirts of the city. May was nowhere to be found, likely off in search of her next wealthy mark. Elena felt no schadenfreude in Nicholas's downfall, only a sense of closure. She no longer felt tethered to the man who had caused her so much emotional turmoil. And yet, in a bittersweet way, she was thankful for the experience. It had given her the clarity to protect herself and her child from men like Nicholas, to be true to herself, and to value her own worth both emotionally and financially. On a crisp winter morning, Elena went into labor. The experience was both frightening and exhilarating, a 9-hour marathon that tested her strength and resilience. In the end, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl she named Rose, an homage to the family's French roots and her mother's favorite flower. Holding Rose in her arms for the first time, Elena felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. This tiny being represented a new chapter in her life, free from the chains of deception and cruelty. Her parents stood by her bedside, tears of joy in their eyes. Gabriel visited soon after, bearing flowers and warm congratulations. The nurse offered to reach out to the father, but Elena politely declined. She had no desire to complicate Rose's first moments in the world with Nicholas's presence. That conversation could happen in due time, but for now, Rose's life began in an atmosphere of pure, unconditional love. Over the next few weeks, Elena recovered and adjusted to her new role as a mother. She took Rose on gentle walks around the estate, read her stories in soft lullaby tones, and occasionally found herself weeping tears of relief. Every day she felt her heart mending. The sense of betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had discovered an inner power, an ability to stand tall even when the world seemed to crumble. Months later, on a lazy afternoon, Elena received a parcel addressed to her. Inside was a letter from a lawyer representing Nicholas. He wanted to relinquish all parental rights, presumably to avoid child support obligations. The letter stated that Nicholas believed Elena's wealth could provide far better for Rose than he could. He claimed it was in the child's best interest for him to step away permanently. It was a gut-punch realization of just how far he had fallen. He'd rather abandon his own flesh and blood than maintain a legal and financial responsibility. Elena showed the letter to her parents and to Gabriel. They agreed that it was a cowardly move, yet legally it could offer peace of mind. If Nicholas was truly uninterested in being a father, forcing him to remain in Rose's life would only breed resentment. After several days of contemplation, Elena signed the legal documents, effectively releasing Nicholas from any obligations. She also made sure he understood that once those rights were gone, there was no coming back, no chance to stake a claim or re-enter Rose's life at a later date. And so, Nicholas vanished from their world. He retreated into the haze of his own failures, consumed by the wreckage of greed and betrayal he had sown. On the rare occasion Elena thought about him, she wondered if he'd ever comprehend what he had lost, not just material wealth, but the chance to be a real husband and father. In the final analysis, Elena realized that she and Rose were far better off without him. She had discovered her own strength, validated the sincerity of her own love, and stood her ground against a man who thought money was everything. Her loyalty test, as painful as it was, had saved her from a lifetime of manipulation and heartbreak. And so, Elena moved forward, raising her daughter with the support of family and trusted friends. She embraced her rightful place within the Lavigne legacy, using her resources for philanthropic efforts, contributing to women's shelters, and supporting educational programs for underprivileged youth. She carried in her heart the lessons she had learned. Love must never be predicated on wealth. Trust must be earned and nurtured, and no betrayal could overshadow the fierce love a mother has for her child. As for Nicholas Kingsley and his mistress May, they became cautionary tales in the social circles they once flaunted. Those who chase illusions of grandeur at the expense of genuine connection often find themselves alone when reality comes crashing down. Their betrayal was their undoing. Karma hit, and it hit hard. Elena's story, though born from heartbreak, blossomed into a testament of resilience, self-worth, and the unwavering bond between a mother and her child. Thank you for joining me on this rollercoaster journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimate redemption. From Elena's anguish to her brilliant loyalty test, we witnessed just how far greed and deception can drive a person and how sweet the taste of justice can be when karma strikes back. As Elena discovered her own worth, she emerged from the ruins of a toxic marriage stronger than ever. Her unwavering love for her unborn child and her determination to claim her own destiny stand as a beacon of hope for anyone caught in a web of manipulation.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, They grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed, Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error, but the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home-wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly. The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her key card didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled." Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached, CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. "You have no idea what you're getting into." But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not," Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, She was certain everyone could hear it, but she stood her ground. Continuing. I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain. Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Miss Monroe, please step into my office. Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership. Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud. Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. You can't shut me down like this, he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation. Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan. Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. You'll regret this, he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. And you made a fool of me in front of everyone. Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. You did that to yourself, she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Hartridge said. I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down. With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce." Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Elizabeth Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz," he began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers." "Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. "Have we sent this to the SEC?" "Not yet," the advisor responded. "We wanted to confront them first." Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. "No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars," Hartridge asked. "And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation." Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. "Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby," he announced quietly. "Thank you," Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. "I believe we might need you." Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. Stand down, sir, the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. Let him go. This is a private matter. Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises. Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't do that. I'm on the board. Not anymore, Hartridge said grimly. I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Munro with you. A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her. You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won. But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. I'm sorry you had to endure this, Ms. Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure. Elizabeth gave him a small nod. Thank you. I appreciate your fairness. She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun, striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country, perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. "Jordan never mentioned anything like that. They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future. If you found this story gripping, insightful, or inspiring, we invite you to be a part of our community. Like this video, share it with friends who need a reminder that courage can emerge from chaos, and subscribe for more real-life drama and empowering tales. Let Elizabeth's story serve as a beacon, no matter how ruthless the betrayal. There's always a path to reclaim your power and build a brighter tomorrow. You too can rise like a phoenix.